Welcome to the Chain of Thought podcast. I'm your host, Connor Bronsden, and today we're joined by Logan Kilpatrick, Senior Product Manager at Google DeepMind. You may know him from his popular LinkedIn or Twitter accounts as well, where he opines on AI. Logan, welcome to the show.
I love that. That's me opining on AI is probably the most apt description of what I do online, and I appreciate that.
I think it's a perfect framing for this podcast, too, because that's what we're doing here. And we're really excited to talk all things Gemini with you. Candidly, our producer is a big fan, as am I, because often it seems like Gemini isn't talked about in the way OpenAI's models often are. It seems that anytime the news latches onto a story about AI or the future of AI, the go-to is to run a story on ChatGPT with a baked-in presumption that ChatGPT is the clear AI leader, even when it's not borne out in the data. Gemini is incredibly performant and efficient. In fact, we just released Galileo's new agent leaderboard, evaluating 17 different AI models for their effectiveness and usage within AI agents, and Gemini models took first, third, and fourth in our analysis. But before we dive into all the numbers, let's back up a bit. I'm curious about the role DeepMind played in Gemini's development. Let's talk about the makings of Gemini. What were the core motivations and goals behind the development of Gemini?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think at the foundational level, like Google exists to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible. And if you think about the sort of arc of Google search and a lot of that work that Google's been doing, it's funny, like there's some amount of narrative around like Google being late to the AI game. And if you actually like sit around and look at the product surfaces that we've had for the last 10 years, transformers and LLMs and AI has been like a deep part of the entire product experience that Google has brought to the world, like in sort of the most prominent product experience, which is search. And I think the teams across Google have learned a ton about this. And historically, like Google DeepMind was doing a bunch of sort of foundational research into, building AGI, doing all these collaborations with Google Brain, et cetera, to Google Research. And I think as sort of the LLM moment started to happen, all of those teams came together and said, let's join forces and really sort of build an organization inside of Google that can build the world's best models, deliver them to the world, and then also build product experiences around the models. And that's been the product experience piece has been the like latest addition to this story, but makes perfect sense. The Gemini app moving over from being sort of part of the search organization, and then our product surface area, Google AI Studio and the Gemini Developer API, also moving over to DeepMind to sort of closen this collaboration. I think it's the same sort of goals that we've always had, which is like, how do we put the best models in the hands of the world? And I think there's actually a lot of I was having a conversation with one of the Google Cloud folks in leadership who was previously in academia, and he mentioned something to me which has continued to resonate, which is the line between research and product has never been more blurry. Like if you're someone who's a researcher, like you can really transition to like building products and like creating a lot of value, and vice versa. So it's just this like really interesting time that we're living in.
Absolutely. And it's particularly an interesting time, not just on the broad front, but on the specific, as I know last week, Gemini announced major updates, including additional availability of Gemini 2.0, Flash 2.0, flash-lite, and Gemini 2.0 Pro to more developers and production uses. Obviously, this is an exciting time. Is there anything you want to highlight around these new public availability of these models?
Yeah, no, for the last 2 months, developers have been saying, hey, we love 2.0 Flash. This model is awesome. Let us use it in production. And I think we've been
Yes.
saying, please wait, give us a little bit of time to sort of put the finishing touches on it. And I think we did that work now, and the model is now fully available for production use with higher rate limits. We also updated some other stuff on the API side. And flash-lite is really a continuation of this sort of story that we've been building with developers, which is trying to remove the economic burden for people who want to put AI into production, or in front of their users. And so we kept the same price point that we had with 1.5 Flash, with 2.0 Flash-lite, and made it so that you could continue to, like, if cost is the barrier for you to build with AI, like, let's not have that continue to be the case, and keep the prices low. And then on the pro side, it's how do we push the frontier? How do we push the frontier of coding and agents and a bunch of the new use cases which people care a lot about? And I think those two are really where you start to see the value of the pro model. I think for like most stuff, 2.0 Flash is going to be really great. It's, fully multimodal, et cetera, et cetera. But for coding use cases, the new pro model is a continuation of the Gemini 1206 model that we released back in December, which developers have been loving, and what was one of the highest ranked models for coding use cases.
Absolutely. And I love that you're highlighting these differentiations because, in particular, we've been really impressed by how Gemini has performed around agentic use cases. So, we actually released today, it should be out as of this episode, the results of Galileo's AI agent leaderboard that I alluded to at the start of the episode. And Gemini stole the show with 2.0 Flash topping the charts in performance at a fraction of the cost of other models, was the performance champion with a 93% score at just, what is it, less than seven or just around 7 cents per million tokens. And it excelled in both complex tasks and in our safety features metrics. It's really impressive. And I'm curious to get your perspective on how Gemini is set up for these agentic use cases.
This is the core part of the 2.0 story. So I think the original 1.0 Gemini story was, let's build this model to be natively multimodal. The sort of chapter 2 of the Gemini story is, let's build this model to keep doing all the things it does now and do them well, but also build for this agentic era. And I think we're sort of just getting to the point now where the models are good enough, the infrastructure is good enough, sort of there's enough knowledge sort of shared among developers and founders and builders about like how to actually build agents, where it's like the right place at the right time to go and do this. And specifically, there's a couple of different fronts for agent stuff. Like, one fundamental tool use, I think, is continues to be really important. Shrestha, who's one of my coworkers, drives a bunch of our function calling work streams, and like this is like top of mind. We're screaming it from the mountaintops internally that like the model needs to be incredibly good at function calling. That is the core enabler of a lot of these agentic workflows. But we've gone like a couple of steps beyond that, and training the model to sort of first in a first class way know when to call specific first party tools right now. And the two examples of this are search and code execution. So you can start to think about like, what are some of the fundamental limitations of LLMs? They don't have access to updated world knowledge. And there's a lot of things which they make embarrassingly bad mistakes. A lot of them are related to like simple problems that like you can actually solve with a calculator or by running a little bit of code. And that's where code execution and search come in. And they're like really foundational pieces of like what you would want this intelligent system to be able to do for you. And the model has now been trained to know like, hey, this is the type of question which if the developer wants to make it available, they have the option to make some of these like first party tools available. And we sort of take care of all the scaffolding work and the abstraction work. And it just kind of, works out of the box for you. And for search, like you can use it, you can play around with it for free. It's available for developers. You don't have to sign up for anything paid. And then if you want to scale to production, you can do so. Same thing with code execution. There's like no weird pricing story. You don't have to like pay per session or anything like that. It's like you just pay for the tokens that are created as you're doing this code execution process. So it should be super simple for folks to get started and use both of those.
There are so many interesting threads we can pull on from what you just mentioned. But I want to mention one in particular, which is that function support piece and actually making it easy for developers to use. To call back to the data I mentioned, we looked at DeepSeek too, which obviously has kind of taken the world by storm here the last several weeks. And it has really limited function support. It's not as effective for these kind of agentic use cases. You can't really call tools with it. And this is where I see the effort of Gemini and of the Google team to really be specific and to set up developers for everything they want to do, instead of adding these extra steps that you need to take in order to like leverage these other reasoning models. Can you discuss some of the specific design choices and maybe technical innovations that went into the creation of Gemini, as it's obviously made it so effective for developers to leverage?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is maybe even one level abstracted away from like the design decisions that the research team has made. I think it comes back to like the fundamental goal for the
Mm,
research teams. And I think like this was um this I didn't know this until I sort of came to Google and met with a lot of the folks on our research team. But like the fundamental goal in their mind is like, hey, we're not doing this for for a chat application. We're not doing this for to make Google search really great. Like we really are trying to build this sort of generic very broad set of capabilities that enables everyone to be able to use this. And like developers are actually this like perfect representation of that. If you're in your internal company, Google is a big company and there's lots of different product services, but even at Google, like our internal product areas don't cover all of the different things that external developers might be doing. And I think like that mentality trickles down into all of the design decisions that happen. And I think like foundational function calling continues to be this like critical pillar of support that we're pushing on. I think one of the good examples of this is compositional function calling. So this was part of the feedback from developers is, hey, as the model is using tools, pretty simply, like the order in which the tools are called actually matters a lot. And compositional function calling, which is something that came out with 2.0, which we haven't talked a ton about externally, but is available in the API now, lets you sort of describe the sequence and the chain of the functions. And like that is like purely to enable developers, like giving developers the control. And that made it into the research roadmap because because developers are top of mind for our research team.
I love that, especially because it aligns to what you said earlier about the blurring line between product development and research here. And this design principle of let's make it easy for developers to use, let's make it efficient for developers to use is a fantastic one to enable problem solving with Gemini. Can you provide some examples of other ways that your team is enabling developers to build with Gemini?
Yeah. I think, it's hard to not find examples of this because we spend our whole everything we do is to enable developers to build with Gemini. I think maybe like a couple of like fun examples of this that are top of mind is, in December, we shipped the Multimodal Live API, which is this, um, really incredible experience. If folks haven't tried this before, aistudio.google.com/live gets you into this experience where you can sort of show Gemini stuff and share your screen and text prompt with it and your audio back. This really interesting multimodal experience, really showcasing sort of what I think is going to be possible in the near future, which is this like AI co-presence with you, sort of being able to collaborate with you and see the things that you see. And this is actually one of the big and I'm curious like how you all think about this from like a leaderboard benchmark perspective in the agents world. But I think one of the big limitations of agents is models and the sort of agentic software is not able to do the things fundamentally that we're able to do. Like it can't see and interact in the way that we do. And this leads to like having to build a bunch of scaffolding in order to make this possible. And I think this like multimodal live version of the world is the version of the world in which you can actually like really dramatically simplify the scaffolding that needs to exist to enable agents, and the models can just see, hear, and like control the same sort of controls that we're able to as humans, which I'm excited for two really quick reasons. One, I think like reducing the barrier for developers to actually build stuff, I think is really important. Um, but two, I think there's like a lot of if people in AI talk about the bitter lesson, which is this story of how the sort of general purpose approach to solving a problem like oftentimes beats out the like very like specific approach to solving the problem. And it feels like this like vision type of workflow is the um is kind of a potential example of the bitter lesson. I guess we'll find out over time whether or not this is true, but it feels like vision first is going to be a really interesting future for AI agents.
I really agree because to me, it's kind of felt like these initial flurry of agents from 2024 were really like async junior digital employees. They could help you with some tasks, but they weren't quite ready for prime time at in-depth levels. And now we're seeing with not only these improved models, but improved understanding of how to approach multimodal, which has even more potential. Then obviously these multi-agent architectures, there's some real problems getting solved. There's major workflows that are being automated, and it seems like the impact is only continuing to accelerate here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is funny, and I was remarking to someone yesterday about how the narrative flip flop between like AI hitting a wall to like what is like very clearly this like dramatic progress, both in the product side and in the research side. And I think this continues back to the thread of um, the just these really blurry lines between like what innovation, product or research innovation, like enables these use cases to work. And I think that the takeaway for me is you need great models, but like it actually also takes a long time to build great products. And
Yes.
that's part of like we're all still figuring out as an ecosystem like what are the right product experiences to bring AI to life. And um, I think we're even seeing like in the last couple of months like this whole text to app explosion, which I think is now um, yeah, I was just literally in the meeting before this was talking to someone about this and like how it's this new
Oh.
frontier of use cases, which is super exciting.
It seems like there's been this kind of viewpoint, I think, sold from early AI about, oh, AI is going to be this magic silver bullet. And then we all kind of had a moment where we reckoned with and said, oh, it is really magical in some ways, but there's also infrastructure needs. There's also work we have to do to like set it up for success. And as we build out new capabilities, we continue to find new areas of support we need, new opportunities. Uh, but a lot of this kind of perspective, I think, particularly in the media and from some critics, has been about like, oh, this wall we're hitting was more about, well, we're not seeing the magic, we're not seeing the silver bullet. And really, once you dig into the problem solving piece, you go, this is just part of scaling. This is just part of doing this well. This is just part of actually applying it to production use cases and moving out of research. And honestly, the rapidity with which this has all happened, the velocity at which with which the research and the products are moving is incredible if you zoom out. But it's easy in the moment to get caught up in, well, this doesn't quite work yet, or this isn't 100% of the way there, instead of seeing how far it's come in even just 6 months.
Yeah, I think the narrative is for folks who are sort of close to the action, it's almost funny because if you go and talk to customers and like people who are putting AI into production, like a great example of how early we still are and how much juice there is to be squeezed out is uh, you could probably if you went and talked to 10 customers, 10 people who are putting AI in production in front of their users, I bet you at least 5 out of 10 of those folks would not have a good like eval story. And like they don't actually even know, like they've put AI in production. They don't even know
Yes.
what success looks like for the AI that they put into production. And like, of course, we haven't gotten to the product experience that's like this magic, silver bullet, because like that takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of like to your point to like infrastructure. You have to, historically, maybe there wasn't great eval infrastructure. Maybe there wasn't great like ops sort of dashboarding in order to like keep track of do A/B testing for different prompts. All this sort of infrastructure had to be built, and the ecosystem is running so fast that um, it is like it's almost like the road is being built at the top level, and then like there is no like the foundation has to also be built in order to like support that, and like that's
Yes.
happening in real time, but it's like there's some lag for a lot of this stuff. And to really have the successful use cases and the right product experiences, you need to have that foundation. And I think it feels like we're going to go through this again kind of with this current multimodal agentic situation, which is I think a lot of the scaffolding that was built was around enabling this like really text heavy sort of your analogy of like this like junior digital employee. I think there needs to be this like new set of scaffolding that enables sort of the next layer of this
Yes.
agentic workflow. And that's going to take time. Like I think if you don't think that's true, like you should reset your priors, because like it is going to take time for some of those things to happen.
Absolutely. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention to folks listening that you should check out galileo.ai for eval infrastructure and some of our earlier episodes where we talk a lot more about this. Because I think you've got a great pointer, which is there's so much AI infrastructure that needs to be built out still. There's so much that is so new still to all these products we're developing. And multimodal capabilities are particularly an example of this, where we're just starting to scratch the surface here. How are you thinking about multimodal capabilities and how they could be leveraged in real world applications moving forward?
Yeah, this has been a core part of my thesis for a long time about what the future is going to look like, which is that if you look around, basically multimodal AI is not in production at this point. Like there is very little successful deployments. Like there's a lot of successful text deployments at this point that's happening. I think we're starting to see sort of the inklings of some of these early multimodal use cases, but it's going to fundamentally change a lot of the way that the world works. Partially because if you think about like what was the flow that had to exist, it was and I actually used to be like a machine learning engineer doing training computer vision models. And like I lived this in my life as a machine learning engineer, which is the amount of time it would take to solve one of these like domain specific computer vision problems was like on the order of 9 to 12 months in a successful case. Like you had to go and collect all the data. You had to train a model end to end. You had to put that thing in production. You had to like build all this infrastructure to make sure like how is it fault tolerant and reliable and all this stuff. And I have to imagine, I reflect on my personal career and journey every once in a while. And I have to imagine that if I could go back in and drop like a vision language model or the multimodal capabilities of one of these models into my hands just literally 5 years ago, it would have been like, this is alien technology. Like it would have been the
Yes.
craziest thing in the world because it would have just solved those problems right out of the box. And like the models can do image segmentation now, and they can do bounding boxes and object detection. It's like all of the domain specific computer vision problems just work from these models today. Not even including like fine tuning for a bunch of these use cases to like take them to the reliability degree that you need. And I think the thread of this that gets me excited is who is this stopping from putting like really interesting vision use cases into production? It was like the early stage founders who had some crazy, or like the business owner who has some crazy idea who like can't do that thing because they don't have a bunch of like ML PhDs who can go and train models for them from scratch. And like now those folks can literally just string up an LLM API and put whatever it is that the use case that they want and bring that thing to life. And that gets me so excited for the world. And I think that's the promise of this technology, like actually coming to fruition of sort of democratizing access to be able to build some of these things.
Logan, I'd love to talk more about how Gemini is going to differentiate itself from other LLMs in the market. What's the approach that the development team is taking to not just enable developers, but differentiate from these other solutions?
Yeah, this is an interesting thread to pull on. I think we've historically, I think there's two sides of this coin. Like one, sort of foundationally in some cases, like we let research guide what's going to happen. And in that context, it's like, you know, the researchers are close to this magic. Let's have them continue to do research and then like find out how to bring whatever that capability that's being unlocked by research to the outside world. Um, and then on the other hand of the coin, it's like, hey, we know developers need this thing. Let's go and figure out how to make that happen. And perhaps like a good example of the latter is long context. Like it's
Mm.
sort of the Gemini team knew like, hey, this is a capability that would matter a lot. Let's go figure out how to make the algorithmic progress in order to enable long context, and then like the infrastructure work in order to make that actually work at scale in production. And I mean, it's been one of the biggest differentiators for Gemini is like Gemini has this long context window. We also have had this, we were the first to ship native search. We were the first to ship caching. We were the first to have a native multimodal LLM that could take in video, images, audio. Hopefully we'll be the first folks to actually have the capability generally available to output audio and images as well, which is sort of the sort of rounding out of that native multimodality story, which I'm really excited about. The other piece of this is you get a bunch of really interesting because of, and this is like a thing that I is one of the many benefits of Google and the breadth that Google has, which is as all the different parts of Google go and deploy these models into production, there's like really bespoke constraints. And like an example of this is like search has, it has like one of the reasons that made Google search so successful initially was like the speed at which you could get results back. And I think like there are these core design constraints that all of the different parts of Google have. And you end up like with really interesting approaches to how to solve some of these problems. Whether that's like we make a smaller model or whether that's, caching, et cetera, as you sort of look at all these different constraints. So I think there's this strong partnership between research and all the product areas inside of Google as we think about like what are the right models and the right sort of architecture decisions to make as we bring these models to the world.
It also seems like there's an underrated part of this story that I don't even hear Google talking about as much as maybe I expect, which is that Google has a multi-year advantage as far as experience with aligning their hardware and custom silicon to their models. What do you see this providing Gemini and enabling going forward?
This is a such a exciting thread. Um, I think it's something that just like kind of makes sense to me. I mean, I'm not a hardware expert. Like I think like I'm a beneficiary because I love the Gemini models and because we work on and bringing them to the world of the custom silicon that we have. And it's really like the two things are hand in hand. Like Gemini is sort of optimized for this experience of running on the TPUs that we have, the tensor processing units. And as the sort of innovation keeps happening on the TPU side, it enables the models to be faster, better, cheaper, all this stuff. Like, you know, why are we able to bring models to the world at the price point that we're able to? It's like because we actually have control of the hardware too. And like the cost basis is sort of included in part of that process, which like really is a great advantage for us, but also like the beneficiaries of the advantage is the developer community, which I love.
Yes.
Like it's such an awesome outcome for the world that like this cost saving is passed on to developers and enables the external world to actually benefit from this.
Absolutely. And I mean, going back to our data again here, when we looked at these 17 models, Gemini was not only at the very top as far as performance, but also very close to the top end cost as far as being the cheapest. And like this just enables you to solve harder problems without the incredible spending that sometimes it would take otherwise. And I just feel like it's such an underrated part of the story. Like you alluded to long context earlier. My understanding from reading Google's announcements here is that long context has really been enabled by the incredible silicon advantage you have here with the custom chips. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. There's a bunch of research breakthroughs that enabled long context on the algorithmic side, but I think like the only reason we're able to put long context into production, like at the scale that it is because of TPUs. I think the TPU story, and without getting into all the details, like it is not, it is just as much a algorithmic breakthrough story as it is like an infrastructure breakthrough
Yeah.
story. The fact that long context is able to work all the way up to 2 million tokens with the Pro series of models. So I'm excited to like um, to keep seeing this, to keep seeing that thread play out over time, which is like we'll get longer context. And I think this like again, you can sort of that use case can inform the decisions that we make as far as like what hardware to build. Like, hey, we want 10 million token context or 100 million token context. How do we do that? Like maybe there's a hardware story to look into there.
Oh man, I wish we had 2 hours for this conversation. I'm gonna have to have you recommend someone from the hardware research side because I think it would be great to dive deeper on this topic.
Yeah.
But I know we want to focus this conversation around what's happening with Gemini around enabling developers. And one of the really interesting things that you kind of alluded to earlier is that Gemini often has been ahead of the game as far as its competitors with getting different features out, ahead in research. And yet it's not talked about as much. Some of this is marketing. Some of this is, oh, maybe there wasn't a complete feature set for this. But one example that I think is really interesting that I have to give credit to our producer Adam for highlighting is deep research, where Gemini has had a deep research capacity for weeks, months now. And depending when you listen to this back episode, maybe it's years when you listen to this. And yet it was OpenAI's announcement of the same features with the same name that seems to have generated all this buzz in the last week or so. And not to say that's not a cool product. I'm also a fan of what OpenAI is doing, but it does seem like there is this almost hesitation in the ecosystem to talk about some of the really incredible stuff that Google is doing. And yeah, I'd love to understand how you see deep research enabling more agentic workflows or more problem solving for devs. because it seems like such an interesting tool.
Yeah. No, it is, and deep research feels like a product experience which like Google is very uniquely suited to bring to the world. Um, I think, and just in the last like the time of this recording and sort of at the time of release, like we will have now rolled out to all you to users on Android and users on iOS, which I'm really excited about. So you can sort of on the go bring deep research with you and kick off some of those long running search queries. It's such a and similar to the story of like how we bring search to developers in the API. I think like deep research is such a product that Google is so uniquely suited to build and really um, I think starts to push on this thread of like what is the world going to actually look like in the next the next like 3 to 5 years. And the piece that I like about deep research through this lens specifically is like this long running asynchronous experience where you sort of I don't need to sit around and wait for this thing to happen. I just like sort of get an email or I'm notified via my a mobile app push notification that this thing is now done. And you could actually imagine where like proactively this starts to happen for you in the future where you have Gmail and you're getting maybe an investment pitch or someone saying, hey, let's go and go on a trip somewhere. And then deep research is behind the scenes is like, hey, let me actually just be proactive here and compile a bunch of information for you so that you can make an informed decision. And in many cases maybe you ignore all that because you're like, yeah, I don't I don't have time to read through all this stuff. But for people who want to, like, I think about my girlfriend, like we, spend a ton of time looking at like all the options of everything that we might do, whether it's going to dinner or, going on a trip somewhere. And to sort of take away that burden and just like get access to that information, I think is going to be a really, um, it's going to be such a powerful product experience. And um, yeah, I also think like the thread around trying to I think the Gemini app has made a ton of progress in eliminating the time delay between like maybe a model, like an experimental model availability and a rollout into the Gemini app. I think they've made a ton of strides there. And like even this week, when we rolled out with Pro and flash-lite and the 2.0 flash model, they actually shipped the 2.0 flash model before we did and then rolled out the 2.0 Pro model at the same time that we did. So I think getting the models out to everyone as soon as possible is super critical. And the sort of feature set as well, as far as like deep research and other things, getting that out to more users as soon as possible, I think is going to be awesome. And also actually seeing the deep research experience benefit from our latest models. Like we have 2.0 Flash and 2.0 Pro Experimental and our reasoning model. And seeing what that experience looks like with those three models is going to be truly awesome.
And I absolutely think this integration story with other Google products is a really exciting one for Gemini, both with everything that's happened with the Google suite. And I have to give major credit to, I think, both Google and Microsoft for how they're thinking through integrations with the G Suite products, and Microsoft case with their Office products. Like there's a clear story here for like, we're just going to help you do everything you're doing better. But where I see Google really differentiating is, hey, look, we also have this incredible hardware opportunity with our mobile devices, with Pixel, with Android. Talk to me a bit about what's coming or kind of the vision for the future with Gemini on mobile.
Yeah, I think my sort of mind was initially blown on this back at Google I/O. I got my hands on one of the Pixel devices that was one of the few ones that was running the Astra build, and getting to like I spent like the better part of a few hours like going around and trying a bunch of different use cases and demos and stuff like that, just in like normal ways. And I actually tweeted out this video of trying that Astra experience natively on Pixel using one of those like really confusing espresso machines. And like every time I walk by one of those in an office or somewhere, I'm like, there's no shot that I'm going to try to
Yeah.
use this. This is like foreign space technology is what it looks like to me. And I was literally live going through this experience of showing the Astra experience, like how do I actually do this? And it was giving me step by step instructions, and I actually did make the coffee successfully. And now I know how to do this. So it was like this really cool experience of, you know, something really simple. But you start to think about like what are the hardware implications of this? And again, like I'm not in the hardware space and I'm not on the Pixel team, but I'm excited about like the models actually becoming available and like the entire experience living on your phone and like doing it in a way that's private and secure. Um, Makes a ton of sense. And like the same innovation that enables like our large Gemini models is the same innovation that ends up enabling both the open source Gemma models, but also Gemini Nano, our smallest model that works on device. So there's this really great trickle of research into the hardware products as well.
Fantastic stuff. And I also think it's exciting to see what's happening with G Suite. And it's been interesting for me as someone who, I hope I can be honest with you here, I was mostly using Claude and ChatGPT until Gemini rolled into the G Suite integration. Now I'm finding myself using Gemini way more, and it's really exposed me in a way to some of the fantastic stuff that Google's doing with a lot of your models. And obviously now with our research here, I'm kind of going, oh, okay, I need to be using this for agents more. But it seems like there's this major opportunity to have, I'll call it Gemini awareness, just expand not only across developers, but across the entire range of folks worldwide who are using all these G Suite products, whether for school, for work, or otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think like the core of this is we we have to earn it by building a great product experience, by building a great model experience. And I think the last few months has been this incredible amount of momentum progress that we've made. And I think like on the model side, like we've, the models are the best they've ever been. We have the strongest offering of Gemini models that we ever have. And I think the product story is becoming extremely compelling across the whole suite of Google's offering, which is just yeah, it gets me excited. And like again, at the end of the day, it's like remove friction from users, enable people to get more work done, of make sure that
Yeah.
they don't do the things they don't want to do. And it's like this is just such a win for folks, and to be able to do more stuff, I get jazzed about it.
Absolutely. I think it's really cool to see the opportunities to find time for more creative or deep work tasks when you can offload some things to an AI agent or AI integration to help you through this. And it's just a really exciting future where not only developers but normal everyday folks are going to be enabled to just solve more problems with some of these Gemini integrations. And it's really cool to see this vision coming to fruition here. And I, for one, I'm really excited to see how you and your teams at Google continue to roll this out and kind of what the future looks like. Is there anything you want to share for us as far as kind of a capper to this conversation about, in your mind, what that future should look like for developers? What should
Yeah.
they be thinking about as they start to interact with Gemini, try out these new models, and really push the boundaries of what's possible?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, on the cost side, I think the the big challenge with the age of AI is builders are economically disincentivized from building with AI. Like the more AI you add into a product experience, the higher your cost is, the lower your margins end up being, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why the cost piece really matters. And I think the future is going to look a lot like probably in the near term, probably 100 to 1,000x more inference compute that's happening as agents themselves start to actually be the ones who are like right now there's almost this one to one, with a couple of exceptions, this one to one correlation between like a human using some input device and like AI inference or like tokens being generated. And you imagine the future where like that's actually not the case. Like I have an entire team of agents across all these domains that like are helping me live my life and do the things that I do more effectively. Um, in that world, the only way that that world ends up being possible is with models that are at the cost of the Gemini 2.0 Flash models. Like I think it's just really difficult to imagine um, that, or like the products are going to be really expensive if that's not the case. And like I think
Yes.
the world needs the products to be actually reachable by most people if the value is going to be there. So I'm happy that that's the direction that we've been pushing in, that we're going to continue to push in. I think the second piece of this, which I'm excited about, and we don't have Yeah, we don't have anything in this space yet, but is like a direction that I'm jazzed about is around memory. I think there's a lot of stuff around, you know, the right product experience for these agent workflows or these different tools is like again when you go into the G Suite and you're in Google Docs, like I want the model to know like when I kick open a blank Google Doc, I was just pinging people about this context of the doc that I'm going to write and like maybe the framing of why this is a problem that I want to try to and like all of that context needs to be captured and brought with me, not just in the sort of domain of the Google products, but everywhere I go. Like I don't, if I go to everyone should be using tons of different tools. And as I go to other tools, like I want those things to have the context that I had as I was just building stuff. And I think like that world is not going to happen instantaneously, but it is the future that we're going towards.
Yes.
And again, you think about like the agents themselves. I don't want some generic agent that like knows nothing about me and like doesn't actually have any of my context doing, solving problems on my behalf. And this is actually partially why it doesn't work today. Like, because the agents themselves are like, you have this task, you know nothing about who you're doing this task for. You're sort of just this like invisible force behind the scenes. And really, for those tasks to be solved in the way that I think makes users happy, there has to be that level of context. There has to be that level of understanding of the user. And this memory piece, like just like humans, where like, the things that aren't helpful kind of, get deprioritized, but are still somewhat accessible in certain contexts. And the stuff that's relevant is sort of baked in and helps the model get better over time and the experience get better. It's just such a cool future.
It's a really exciting future. And Logan, thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about it and share this vision for Gemini. It was a pleasure to have you with us today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, this was a ton of fun. Thank you for having me.
Where can folks who are listening go to learn more about your work and the work you're doing at DeepMind and with Gemini?
Yeah, if you want to try out Gemini, if you're sort of in the consumer world, gemini.google.com. If you're a developer, you can go to aistudio.google.com. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, you can email me. I email all the time. So whatever is easiest, always happy to help on Gemini stuff.
Fantastic. We're going to link all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. And thank you again, Logan, for coming on. You can find the new AI agent leaderboard we discussed linked in the show notes or live on galileo.ai. And if you are checking out the show notes, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, whatever platform you're on. We'd love to have you listening every week. It helps us bring more incredible guests like Logan on the show. And maybe we'll have someone on from the Google research side sometime soon. So stay tuned for that. And don't forget to check out our Galileo YouTube channel for full episodes, clips of our favorite moments from each guest, webinars, and so much more, like recordings from our events like Productionize. We will see you next week. Thank you so much, Logan.
Thank you.